The latest inflation numbers are out, and there's some good news and some bad news. Inflation as a whole is down to 3.4%, which is the good news, and it's mainly due to oil and gas prices falling. But the bad news is groceries are still up by 9%, while mortgage rates have gone up close to 30%. Now, to chat about this in more detail is political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilley, who joins us once again from the Big Smoke. Now, Brian, speaking of mortgage rates going up, my 4-year close is coming to an end this year at 2.79%. It's coming to an end at the end of the month, and I renewed for 3 years for 5.09%. And you know what? That's actually a pretty good deal.
That's a good rate now. Now, look, there was a time when I first was buying my first home, that would have been a good rate. But so many of us got used to lower rates, buying bigger homes, taking out bigger mortgages, getting used to spending your money elsewhere. When rates were really low, when you were paying prime plus 0.5 or prime. At one point, I had prime minus 0.6. I felt like I was stealing money from the bank. You get used to being able to have money to spend elsewhere. Well, now you're not alone among people I'm talking to who I've either just had mortgages come up for renewal or they're about to, and they don't know what to do. It's, depending on your stage in life, depending on where you're living, this is going to be a big hit. We're talking of thousands of dollars a month for some families, and that's just not tenable. Inflation continues to go up. It was good that in May there was a drop in gas prices. It seems to have gone back up in June, so don't expect that core inflation rate to keep going down. But look at the other big item, the item that we can't do without. You could decide, okay, well, I have to walk away from my house, or I have to sell my house and I'll rent somewhere. Well, you still have to eat. And food prices at the grocery store are up 9%. And don't think that you can get away cheaper at a restaurant. Of course, we know restaurants are more expensive, but they're being hit with this inflation as well. And restaurant prices, even as they try and put the squeeze on to keep their prices down so that you still show up, still buy your meal or have a night out now and again, it's up, I believe it's 8.6%. So overall, Canadians are still getting hammered on main basic items, and inflation is not under control. Yes, it's a worldwide problem. It's not just hitting Canada. Some places are worse, some places are better. But as everyone from Scotiabank, former bank governors have said, the Trudeau government's high spending rates have added to the inflation in Canada. Part of this is self-inflicted wounds.
And Brian, we've chatted about greedflation and the rising cost of groceries, not just now, but the last couple of months or so. We've also talked about the price fixing in bread. And now a report from the Competition Bureau says the grocery business is too concentrated in Canada, and they want to see the government bring in a little more competition. Competition, they say, is good for the consumer. But let me ask you something. Will it happen?
It's odd to hear this from the Competition Bureau. Federal government policy for decades has been less competition, not more. There's a reason that we have in industry after industry across this country, a concentration of power and market share in a few companies, in a few families' hands, whether we're talking about food distribution, food production, cell phones, media even, you name it, it becomes highly concentrated. And part of that is we don't allow foreign competition in many of our industries. But the Competition Bureau is saying maybe we need to look at that. They're also calling, bizarrely, for the government to help setting up online shopping stores so that people can shop online for their groceries. I don't know about you, Hal, but I can shop online from Sobeys has an app for that, and all their stores are represented on that. Loblaws does, and whatever your local Loblaws brand is, you can do online shopping there, or Metro, or Amazon, or Walmart. There's no end to the number of stores you can buy groceries from online. And I don't know that the government getting involved in online shopping is a recipe for success. But I'd be interested in hearing what they want to do on the issue of allowing foreign competition or bringing in other chains. There's companies like Aldi, which is originated in Europe. They're across the United States now, a discount chain with a lot of store brands that are lower prices, good quality, but lower prices. Would they allow them into Canada? Would they be interested in coming here? Or would the problem be, as is with our cell phones, if we opened up our cell phone market tomorrow to big American players and didn't put out rules around it, they would all just focus on Toronto and Vancouver and not service the rest of the country. Well, that doesn't help. So would they do the same in food distribution and grocery stores as well? Just come here, but not to Lethbridge, let's say. Well, if that's the case, it doesn't help consumers where you are. It doesn't help consumers across the country.
Brian, there was a big by-election in Toronto, and the winner was former NDP MP Olivia Chow. Now, some may also remember Olivia as the widow to former federal NDP leader Jack Layton. So, Brian, what will this mean for people in Canada's biggest city, where you are?
It's going to mean higher taxes. We just don't know how high. But here's the problem. Olivia Chow, she won. She won with about 37% of the vote. We had about 40% voter turnout, and realistically, she won with about 15% of eligible voters casting a vote for her. She also doesn't have an existing coalition at City Council. This is the City Council that John Tory, the former mayor who stepped down for his bizarre reasons, this is the council that he put together, that he cobbled together of people who would vote with him in a coalition. A lot of centrists, maybe slightly left of center liberals and right of center conservatives, but all coming around in a coalition to vote for an agenda. Chow doesn't have that. So she's going to have to put some water in her wine if she wants to move forward with her agenda. She's going to have to compromise. And it's going to be an interesting time, though, because it is a radical departure. And I've covered Olivia Chow for a long time, known her for close to 20 years. She herself is not a radical. She's definitely a socialist, but she's not a radical. She can be very pragmatic. But some of the people around her, there are questions. Haven't seen these people in positions of power. Are they going to be radicals? Are they going to try and bring radical change to City Hall? If so, it's going to be a bumpy ride.
Now, some people say Conservatives never actually win in Toronto, but you say that's not necessarily true. Why is that?
One of her main contender last night was backed by a lot of conservatives, and that woman came within a few thousand votes of beating Chow. So there are conservative voters here. And when you look at the elections over the last couple of years, in 2021, the majority of voters in Toronto, or the plurality of voters, backed Liberals, and the Liberals took every seat in the city federally. Provincially, they backed Doug Ford in the PCs. More people voted for the Ford government than any other party in Toronto in the 2022 provincial election. And last night, they voted for an NDPer to be the mayor. So, the city is not necessarily nailed down politically. I know people like to think that, but there are strong pockets of conservative support in Toronto. That's got to be good news for Pierre Poilievre. He's just got to find out how to tap into that.
Now, you recently reported that the Trudeau government has refused once again to release basic information about Beijing's interference to not only an MP, but also to the media. So, Brian, what are they holding back?
They're holding back who received the report on Michael Chong being targeted by China, the report that was issued by CSIS on July 20th, 2021. Shortly after that was reported at the beginning of May, Michael Chong submitted an order paper question, which is an official way of asking the government a question. It doesn't happen in question period. You submit to the government. They have 45 sitting days to reply and give the MP an answer. And they're supposed to be just straight up front. There's not supposed to be political spin. It's not meant to further debate one way or another. It's, I'd like this information. Here's the information. In this case, he asked the Privy Council Office, Public Safety Canada, and Global Affairs Canada. The Privy Council Office admitted that the memo had gone to the National Security and Intelligence Advisor at the time, who read it about a month later. In the middle of the 2021 election. The other two departments just said, well, we received it on the 20th of July, 2021. We circulated it the next day to the appropriate people. But they didn't say who it was. Michael Chong was very specific. Who received it and when? They didn't say. The media that they refused to give an answer to was me, because at the same time that Michael Chong was putting forward his order paper question, I submitted an access to information request asking for the tracking documents. Documents like this aren't just passed around willy-nilly. There are tracking documents so that the government knows who has them, who's seen them, where leaks may be coming from. And both the Privy Council Office and Public Safety Canada said, oh, we looked and we can't find them. How? Unless they have completely changed the way that government operates in the last couple of months, because the Trudeau government has used these. We've got proof of it. We've used them before. We've used this method to find out information before, asking for tracking documents. They said that there's nothing. So, I simply don't believe that. They've got to be playing a word game or something. But they're outright refusing to answer the question from Michael Chong and playing games with the media when I ask them questions.
So, Brian, let's talk about the public inquiry, a potential public inquiry into China's alleged interference in our federal elections. What's the latest there?
Well, David Johnston, who recommended against one in his role as special rapporteur, he submitted his final report, and we won't get to see it. How about that? That gets to stay secret as well. As far as a public inquiry, the government just keeps saying to the opposition, give us names. The opposition is saying, well, call a public inquiry and we'll help you, or commit to it, and we'll help you choose names. So there's a bit of a standoff there. You listen to the NDP and they say there is movement towards coming to an agreement, but they haven't come to one yet. I was hoping that last week they would do that by the end of the session, or at least by the end of last Friday. That hasn't happened. So the pressure has to be kept up. And look, the fact that they're refusing to answer questions from Michael Chong, they're refusing to answer access to information requests from me, this is just more proof of why we need a public inquiry, because to get to the bottom of this, it appears to be the only way. This government is blocking on all fronts. Even, I think CBC has a story out today in CIRA, this committee, this oversight committee that Justin Trudeau brags about, is complaining to the government that they're not releasing documents, that they've asked for cabinet documents, they've asked for other information, and the government won't give it to them. So this is a government that has a pattern of trying to block the release of information. A public inquiry, something I'm normally not in favor of, appears to be the only way to get that going forward. And on that front, the government's dragging their heels.
So, Brian, what's the latest with Bill C-18? It passed in the Senate, and now?
Now it has royal assent, and most media outlets across the country are waiting on tenterhooks, worried that Meta, which is the parent company for Facebook and Instagram, is going to follow through on their threat and block Canadian news. Look, I have access to the full data analytics of Postmedia, the entire company, not just the Toronto Sun. It's significant. It's bigger for some operations than others. We have a very healthy what's called referrals, and we all do this. We all track where our traffic comes from. Is it coming from Facebook? Is it coming from Instagram, Twitter, Google News, Google Search? We've got a healthy ecosystem, but it's still going to be big for our company. Other media outlets have built strategies around driving a lot of traffic from Facebook. They're going to be in trouble. Political news, as I think I mentioned to you last week, it's already been downgraded by Facebook. But on the issues of sports coverage, weird news coverage, local news coverage, lifestyle stories, that's what gets shared on Facebook a lot. And if you're relying on that traffic, you're going to take a significant hit if they do it. It'll be worse for everybody else if Google backs out on this. So look, the government has taken a very strident tone in this, a tone that I don't think is helpful. Full disclosure, Postmedia, my employer, backed C-18, but most major media outlets did. But some are starting to say there's a bit of a tone problem. La Presse, one of the major media outlets in Quebec, they came out with an editorial saying the government's strident tone, the government's poking Facebook and Google in the eye approach isn't the right one. And while they supported the bill, they don't appreciate what the government's doing because they're worried it'll lead to bad things. If this happens, people are going to see a major difference in their social media feeds, but news outlets are going to see a big drop in traffic. That's bad for the industry, bad for democracy.
New Brunswick Premier Blaine Higgs is apparently facing a bit of a revolt within his own party. Now, is this partly due to a new school policy that says parents must be notified before schools change a child's gender, name, or pronouns?
Partly, I had a 40-minute interview with Blaine Higgs last week for the Full Comment podcast that I host. And we spent about 20 minutes talking about that school bill and why he's for it. And he said, look, I'm all about protecting the kids, but I'm also about parents' rights. And we've got to find a balance. And the previous policy didn't have that. He got some pushback within his own party over that issue and that stance, but he's got the majority of Canadians across the country on that issue. 57% of Canadians, 62% of Canadians with kids at home believe that, yeah, parents should be informed before names or pronouns or genders are changed at school, that that's not something teachers should be doing without talking to parents. Higgs has another problem, though, and that's something we also discussed in the podcast. He's got a managerial problem. He comes from the private sector, and he was very blunt and upfront with me. He, spent more than 30 years in Irving Oil as an engineer and a manager, and he's got a way of doing things that maybe doesn't always translate well to politics. He said he should have been glad-handing and backslapping with the riding association presidents and different members of the party more than he has. That's not his style. I think that issue is probably driving the revolt against him as much, if not more. I mean, they might be using the C-13 school changes as the impetus, but this has been brewing under the surface or boiling under the surface for quite some time. And that might be the issue that they're springboarding on. But Blaine Higgs has said if it comes to 713, his school policy change, he'd fight an election on it. And I'll say this, if he does fight an election on it, he's going to win the election, and maybe with a bigger majority, but not if his party is in the middle of a giant infight.
Political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for joining us today from Toronto.
Thank you, Hal.